Just a reminder, if everyone please make sure your cell phones are on silent. Appreciated.
Who are you?
Exactly.
I gotcha.
That's very great people. Because he's not a good So,
We have no public hearings this evening. Appointments, we have the budget deliberation. So if you want to hash through.
So in your packet, you have, it's actually the same as last week because the board supported the recommendations from the advisory budget committee on the operating budget. So you'll see a budget cover, which represents a 2.47% increase over last year. And then the second document, the 10-page document, which shows by budget line what the current proposal is. And this would be the opportunity for the board to make any recommendations, ask for any additional information, make any final changes. The operating budget will need to be finalized by the December 16th meeting, going to the January 6th public hearing. But certainly if we can finalize it tonight, that's just forward progress.
General comments or feedback?
I'm all set.
I feel very comfortable with the recommendation.
All right. Do we want a motion or do you want to wait for the rest of the board to come back?
So is select person Aaron going to be present?
My understanding as of this afternoon was yes.
So can we move it a little further down in the meeting, chairperson, and see if we can involve select person?
Well, we could consider just going from tonight's issue to December 16th for the final one we got coming up. That's to be our final approval night.
Right.
And if he does come in, we can discuss it and or go from there. So take both of them together.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
So delay a vote to finalize for the December 16th meeting, but I will prepare materials that reflect the current proposal, pending any last minute changes the board might have in mind. Okay, great.
Thank you.
So the next items for finalization and consideration are the proposed warrant articles. So you have in your packet a list of the current proposed warrant articles. So this includes the proposed language. Once I finalize the specific warrant articles, I'll be submitting it for legal review. So if you have any input on language, definitely let me know. But a lot of times we don't have a lot of control anyways. So what I will need from the select board for each proposed article in the packet is first a vote to place the article on the warrant, and second, certainly a vote of recommendation. So the vote to put it on the warrant needs to happen prior to the January 6th public hearing. The recommendation, no, January 6th. The January 6th public hearing. So the warrant articles need to be finalized and posted prior to the public hearing. The vote on whether to recommend or not just needs to be finalized prior to deliberative session on February 1st. So those recommendations go on the warrant, which is posted for deliberative session. And then if there are any changes at deliberative session, the select board has an opportunity to make adjustments to those recommendations at that time. So there's nothing, unless the select board were looking for additional information, there's nothing to prevent you from taking a vote of recommendations, other than it would be nice to have a full board for those votes. So that could happen either the 16th or the 6th.
I would ask the same reply to that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Tracy,
I think it's
you-
important. I never like it when it shows on a warrant article that only 3 of us approve something, because without understanding our attendance, it appears to the voters that we're not all fully in support of something when we are.
Sure. Yep.
So I think it's important, because I do think that that is something that people weigh in on.
So is there any of the warrant articles listed, most are either an annual request or a request that the board has already considered, with one exception. Is there anything that the select board would like to have a discussion about or offer an opinion of at this time, even if it isn't a vote? So the two I would be specific, two would be 1, Article 8, the paving and related road work. So this is that $100,000 contribution that comes from fund balance. And as we discussed, and it came out of the advisory budget committee, being in the unassigned fund balance position that we are right now, it might be financially responsible to wait or skip a year for this $100,000 contribution, with the understanding that we can use $100,000 out of a separate capital reserve to maintain the town's unassigned fund balance position. So that would be one I'd be looking for specific consideration from the board on. And the second one would be the article submitted by the Library Foundation asking for $200,000 towards the library project. So that is not factored into the use of the fund balance, so that $200,000 would be in addition to what the numbers that were provided for fund balance position.
And currently, we're going to, based on the utilization, we'll be at what percent of that fund balance?
11.
So 11.3 if we include the 100,000 for related road work.
So
Every 100,000 represents about, every 30 some odd thousand represents about 0.1%. So reducing that 100,000 would bring us back to 11.6, I believe, but I can double check that.
And we should be at, what, the recommendation is 12%?
12.5.
12.5, so we're already at a percent. I need to make a note of this.
We're a little over a whole percent below where we want to
1% below. Is there any chance in the process of finishing out our budget that could change?
It's a great question, and yes. So the biggest change happened from, these year-end estimates are just that, estimates.
Okay.
And originally, based on an 8-year average, I estimated having about a $650,000 contribution to unassigned fund balance. But because revenues were estimated closer to actual, good financial practice, but what that means is there's less unanticipated revenue going into unassigned fund balance. So that's what brought it down to about a $300,000 contribution. That still could change in the last month of the year, but I'm much more confident in the estimate this time of year than I was in September, where we are for unassigned fund balance.
Okay.
So keeping that in mind, we've probably got a little bit of belt tightening to figure out.
So if I were to work backwards, Keno, the service-connected total disability credit, the elderly exemption would be a proposed warrant article if approves, the solar energy exemption at 100% of value of the solar programs, cemetery capital reserve, library technology, I'm just looking, the tricentennial celebration, fire rescue. So the majority of these are the same figure that we often see year after year.
Correct.
And Green Hill Road Bridge replacement, have we been assured of the additional funds for that?
Yes.
So the state has already agreed?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That was on its red list program.
Yeah,
so
I remember that.
And to your point, Tracy, about same values that as we've seen in previous years, during the fire department budget presentation, the select board made the recommendation to increase the fire truck capital reserve contribution from $50,000 to $55,000,
Right, I remember.
with the intention to continue adding more each year up to, I'd have to check my notes, but I believe either 75 or 85,000. The other number that was recommended to change by the advisory budget committee was the contribution to the highway equipment capital reserve. So that has historically been $75,000. Myself and staff admit that we don't have a comprehensive replacement plan in place right now, but working with the ABC, we identified the 3 pieces of equipment most in need of replacement and approximate replacement dates and costs, and recognize that there would be a deficit. So adding $25,000 to that capital reserve contribution to $100,000 is certainly warranted, and we'll work over the next 12 months to develop a more comprehensive replacement plan. So those are the 2 that are different than previous years.
I was going to say, and that was all predicated on the fact that we were not keeping up with the amount of funds needed for replacement of vehicles in those funds.
Yes, exactly.
Is there a way for us to ensure that at the December 16th meeting, we have a full board?
No,
I think it becomes extremely important in placing this in front of our voters that we show very direct support across the board or not support across the board for that.
if I may make a recommendation, what I would suggest is you could take action at any time, voting to put an article on the warrant, and then withhold your vote on a recommendation. You'll have 2 more opportunities to have a full board making your recommendation votes, both on December 16th and on January 6th. So it may be more expedient if you take a vote to put something on a warrant, which you have to do by December 16th anyways, and then withhold your recommendation vote until you have a full board.
Okay. Would the chairperson and select person Bailey agree to work backwards from Article 20 so that we could expedite smaller?
I don't have an issue with that. I know
I
Mr.
don't either.
Bailey did have his hand up. I didn't know if there was something before that you.
No, it's, there are some articles for Article 19 and 18 that I do have comments that I want to make to the board and to the public on those for some information and possibly talk about reconsideration before. So that's the only two I have, Mr. Chairman. I think the idea would be that Selectman Hardikoff had was great.
So do you want to, does anyone
So-
want to make the recommendation on Keno?
I'll make a motion to put Keno on the ballot for the voters to vote on. Looking for a second.
Second,
Roll call vote.
Bailey, aye.
Reluctantly, Hardikoff,
It's my line.
sorry, don't appreciate the Keno. But I think it's up to our voters, so,
I agree.
okay.
It's hard to look at all that money.
I hear you.
I know,
Person Bailey,
Oh, I know you do.
Moving on, Article 19, service-connected total disability credit. Mr. Bailey, you had said you had something you would like to discuss.
On the service disability credit, I feel that I was informed that I did an injustice to this board and to the town is when I first presented that to us. I want to, there's 35 individuals in town that are classified as 100% disabled permanent. And I happen to be one of those. And at the first time this was being discussed, I failed to notify everybody on the board and the public that was here at the time that I was one of those individuals. The second time we had the presentation, fortunately, I was smart enough to say that. But I just want to say that to start with. And I would still ask that the board reconsider going for the $2,550 to be discussed on the 16th with the full board. I would like to see that happen. And also to take into effect on the elderly, that would become next. But I would ask the chair to excuse me on the part of not being right up front. There was no malice intended. It was just, I just didn't get it out there, so I didn't think about it. So I appreciate that.
So
And the other
motion-
thing, and then I'm just asking for that and asking that to go to 4,000 instead of the 2,550. And for the notice of the board and the public, I do have petition warrant article that I will submit. If it's not a threat, it's not, please don't misunderstand this. It was something I've been working on for the other veterans in town. And so I will be submitting a petition warrant article, which I have ample signatures for, and what have you. I'll be presenting that after the 16th because I do not want to see 2 articles on the vote for the people to vote for, one for the board supports and one for the petition warrant article. So that's what that's why I'm waiting on that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for listening to me.
Sorry, Carl.
I would not like to wait on this. I feel very strongly that this should be done as a policy that happens incrementally over time, and that moving to the $4,000 and being the only municipality in the state of New Hampshire to adopt that $4,000 is not in the best interest of our town. I of course say this with the experience of 34 years of being a military spouse behind me, and while I absolutely and positively respect all that have served, they are the 1% of our nation that protects the other 99% of us. I feel very strongly that when we look at the actual income of those that are receiving full disability under veterans benefits in conjunction with Social Security, as it often occurs, that there is ample and appropriate income to be able to provide the portion of their taxation that we are asking to increase to 4,000. And what I would like to do is do it incrementally over time to have a much smaller impact on the actual general population of Barrington.
Mr. Bailey?
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate the fact that your husband did do his time in the service, and he is going to retire with 30 years, I believe, was it 31? 34, fantastic. But the part that has to be realized that some of these 35 are not like myself. Unfortunately, I retired in 1983, and I had no problems until 2007, 2008, when the disease came upon me for the service that I provided prior to 83. It took a while, and yes, I am fortunate to have the Social Security that I have. I am fortunate to have the retirement that I have. Those are things that I've earned, but we do have individuals in town who have the double amputees. Their Social Security is not at the $2,400 and some odd dollars as mentioned at the other meeting. I don't have the exact figures. I feel that's not quite right, and some of the other ones we have that are on the 100% receiving that money also have other pieces. But remember, these 35 is only the ones that have a house to go to. And I just have to say that if the money does not cover all of the other monies, in my particular case, that I still have to use some of my other monies that is not my Social Security and is not my military retirement. I still have to use some of that to pay for the treatments and some medicines because it's not all 100%. But that's my case and not the others. But I'm just saying for the other ones, we need to look at what's before and we go for there.
So is there a motion to move forward with the service-connected total disability credit as written, or is there a motion to alter it?
I would like to move forward with the service-connected total disability credit as written and consider incremental changes to this policy over time.
I'll second the motion.
You got me in a rock and a hard place. I mean, it's going to be more money for the people that are there, but still, it puts me in a situation that I don't like to be in. I have to approve it. You know that. I just can't let it not.
It's not my intention to put you.
No, I know it isn't. I know it
It's
isn't.
my
It's
intention
your.
to do the right thing.
That's right. I understand that. And I Bailey, I'll have to go with it.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye. Bailey, aye. Right, Article 18, elderly exemption. Ms. Hardikoff.
So my proposal on this was twofold. One of it was to recognize the voice of the people that were most impacted, which a single elderly person living alone has a much higher cost of living than living as a couple or in a family unit. And in looking at the figures that we saw for exemptions, this to me was the one that stood out that was disproportionate to the other exemptions, which is why I have proposed this, and also to speak to those who might often utilize a library and would be adversely impacted should we get the support to have our library in place. It was never my intention to negatively impact the people that we most often want to help support by having a good, robust library. So that was my reason for proposing it, and I hope that it's put in front of our voters.
Mr. Mann.
Thank you very much. What we have is we have 95 individuals that are qualified for the elderly exemption being single, and the total amount of money that equates to is $276,000 versus the $70,000 that was on the article that was just approved. I have the figures laid out, and I have no objection to it. The individuals are in need, and you can't take some of the elderly that we have, because I know quite a few of them being there, they also deserve it, but it's still a broad spectrum, and just for discussion today, I was in the tax office, because, you know, that bill's coming due. There was a gentleman in front of me who was asking if we knew what the exemptions were for a car that he was leasing. Well, nobody had the figure, but the clerk said that she would get back to him. I think that one of the things that we should also look at while we're doing the elderly exemption, or at least bring forward, is to have a set standard as to what we would consider an exemption for applying for this, so it'll make it a lot easier. Because what it says is assets of so much money, but it doesn't say what is an asset and what isn't an asset. I think something like that should be looked at. And I feel that I go along with exactly what Selectman Hardikoff is doing under this Article 18.
Okay, motion, so is there a motion to?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap, aye. Article 17, solar energy exemption for up to 100% of value. Any discussion? Motion to move it forward?
Just one question, Mr. Chairman. How, is that to have the equipment on the property, or is it to have the equipment on the property that is in working condition? That's the only thing that when I was looking at it, does it mean working condition? Or if somebody moves in and doesn't know how to operate, it still gets the exemption?
No, that's a great question. So as this warrant article is written, it's to exempt all of the added value from solar equipment. So in the example you raised, Mr. Bailey, if you were to purchase a home that had solar equipment, you would have added assessed value for that solar equipment, regardless of whether you're using it or not. There's no way for the assessors to know if you're using it. And so this exemption would allow that added value to be exempted, so you wouldn't pay taxes on that, regardless of if you were using it.
Thank you very much.
It's a way to encourage people to use green technology.
Definitely.
Yes, I agree, but there are some devious people in this world, so I just want to make sure.
So, yeah, more specifically, it reduces no value not directly related to the solar equipment. So you couldn't put a solar panel on your roof and have a bunch of value reduced from your home for that. It would only reduce the value that's added by the solar equipment.
Glad to hear that, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, motion,
Motion to accept Article 17 as a warrant article placed before the voters.
second it.
Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap, aye, excuse me. Cemetery capital reserve, to appropriate the sum of $1,000 to be added to the cemetery capital reserve.
Motion to accept Article 16 as a warrant article is written.
Second it.
Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap, aye.
Just one quick note, that number might change before the end of the year. I don't anticipate it, but that's just a contribution from any revenue put forward to next year. So that's the revenue at this point.
Gravesite sold.
Correct.
Article 15, library technology capital reserve for the sum of $3,000.
Move the motion.
Second the motion.
Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap, aye. Article 14, tricentennial celebration, expendable trust for a sum of up to $5,000. Or a sum of $5,000.
Well, as soon as how I had to put my voice in it the last time, I'll make the motion.
Second the motion.
Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap, aye. Fire rescue equipment capital reserve for the sum of $10,000.
Oh, sorry, yes, I
you
would make the
motioning?
motion that we accept the warrant article and place it before the voters, Article 13, fire rescue equipment.
Second.
Okay. Nap,
Bailey, aye. Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Hardikoff, aye.
Bailey, aye.
On number 12, emergency communication capital reserve, I will note that the advisory budget committee has withheld a recommendation at this point. They did request one piece of additional information to understand, similar to other capital reserves, are we setting enough money aside or is there enough money in there already? And so primarily this money is anticipated for the replacement of emergency radio equipment and also for the repair of the shared repeater tower that we use for our emergency communications. It may also be used within the next year to add repeater equipment for the highway department for highway equipment, highway radio equipment reliability. And so that information is coming, and that will allow the the advisory budget committee to prepare a recommendation. So the select board can certainly vote to put it on as it is, or wait for the additional information to make a determination.
Is there any information, any comments or any discussion the advisory budget committee would like to add to this before we do that?
Go. Our concern was part of the radio purchase, which I guess is a significant cost, right, Rick? We really didn't know how long it was going to take to coordinate with other communities. That seems to be one of the variables we need an answer to. So if we had that timeline in place, we would better realize whether 10,000 a year is adequate or inadequate. And we really didn't have enough information to formulate what we thought was a reasonable proposal.
Mr. Walker, is there anything you'd like to come up and add?
Just wanted to clarify, you said 10, but it's 50, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Oh, sorry.
My numbers
10,
guy,
50.
My eyes aren't what they used to
my
be.
numbers guy is letting me down. I brag so much that you know about numbers.
I can't read them though.
You can read them if I give them wrong to you, though. So my end, it's like trying to nail jello to a tree. I'm working with 4 other communities to try to put our stuff into place. My understanding from our radio supplier is that we can, Barrington has most of their money put aside to get that piece of it done. And that I believe the town of Madbury does. The other 2 entities are putting money away. It's my understanding from the radio company that we can move forward and get our piece of it done without the others. That being said, I think there should be enough money in there right now to take care of that piece by adding the $50,000 this year. That should be adequate to make sure that we get done what we need to do for the highway department. If the highway department's ready to go prior to budget time, then certainly the board has the authority to take the money and move forward to get the highway department taken care of. I certainly don't want to speak for them. I'm just merely pointing out that you 5 would have the ability to expend funds to get the highway up and running to better serve them and us and the police if they're using the analog local channel. Select person Knapp discussed the idea, I think last year, maybe the budget committee, about rather than going out and buying 38 or 40 portable radios and 6 mobile radios at a cost of about $175,000, I would guess, that it would be done in maybe over 3 years or 4 years, so that it offset the radios and that it wouldn't force the town next number of years down the road to be replacing 40 again. So I think that I've been putting some stuff together. I think that we can make that work. So I personally believe that we're still okay at the 50,000.
Any other discussion from the ABC?
Thank you.
I personally, I prefer to wait for a recommendation from the ABC on this. Can we hold off on this one?
Could we make a motion to move it forward? Just to be voted on at a later point in time? To move it forward as a warrant?
I make a motion to put it on the table for, as a warrant article to be considered on December 16th.
So you likely won't have a recommendation for December 16th. The next planned advisory budget committee meeting is after the first public hearing, January 6th, to finalize and update any warrant article recommendations. They've gone through the budget and the warrant articles.
How would that affect us then with the public notice?
Well, you don't have, so the notice doesn't have to include those recommendations.
May I speak? We wouldn't, the three of us, and I'm assuming George would agree, we wouldn't mind leaving it at the 50 so you can move forward with that.
Very good.
And the advisory budget committee could wager a recommendation now, there's a quorum present.
Withdraw my motion.
So motion to advance the emergency communications capital reserve, sum of $50,000.
I would second that. I would definitely like to have a response from the ABC when it goes forward to the voters.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so
Sure.
second.
Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye. Fire truck capital reserve for the appropriation, to appropriate the sum of $55,000. This is the one last year that we let stand alone.
Correct.
So the,
Well, with the bridge and culvert, the two of them.
right, bridge and culvert and the fire truck capital reserve and the townsfolk agreed to support it.
ABC has not weighed in on this one.
I think we have.
I see numbers here instead of a support number.
I would have to double check the minutes, if you bear with me.
I don't have them with me.
Yeah, I can pull them up. I thought I recorded all of the ones the agency acted on. There were a couple that they asked for additional information, and a couple that were, will have to be voted on at the next meeting. You could ask the advisory
I
budget
think this
committee if
was
they have
the other one
perspective.
that we deferred on.
Not this one?
No, the fire truck one was one we,
You deferred on?
Yeah, number 7.
Okay.
So again, this is the one the select board discussed earlier, made the determination that they thought 55,000 was appropriate.
For this year?
Yeah, for this year, based on where we are and where we're headed. I think the question with the advisory budget committee was just making sure that the math planned out for future utilization made sense with the 55. And so certainly that could be something that's revisited this year, or also in future years when the select board already intends to adjust that in the future on an incremental basis up to, I'd have to check the minutes, either 75 or 85,000.
So, if you don't mind, my general conversation is if I look at the three articles that we're talking about, the fire truck capital reserve, the bridge and culvert capital reserve, and the highway equipment capital reserve, looking at the total amounts in there, we would pick up about, if we let those two again stand on their own, because the public is very good at supporting those, and then we took the highway equipment capital reserve, or I'm sorry, not the highway equipment, the paving and related roads, we could pick up about 0.7% and get us to 12% of our midpoint, and we would still be about 0.5% shy, which, you know, if we can really work hard at here over the next couple weeks, we might be able to make up the full 12.5%.
My other question is, the money that was sent from the state, and we voted to take 90,000, correct, and buy down the tax rate, but we are not allowed to do that with the second year, correct?
Essentially, so
Okay.
this year it was unanticipated revenue.
Right.
Next year, we anticipate it, so
Right.
it's anticipated revenue.
So would that help us, since we're not utilizing that and we know it's anticipated revenue, in any way with the unexpended funds, so that we're not continuing to float below the 12.5% recommendation? Of course, as a fiduciary, you know, representative for the town of Barrington, the concern is ever putting us below where we should be with that fund.
So I think I understand your question, and the answer is maybe. So, you know, if you understand.
That's crystal clear.
Right, I know,
Thank you,
yeah.
Kathy.
So I mean, if you understand that money's fungible, then yes, certainly 90,000 in one area offsets an equal amount in another area. It doesn't happen directly, so, you know, that revenue that comes in simply is collected as general revenue to offset all of appropriations. So there's not necessarily a one-for-one match. You could act
we
like
know
there
it's
is.
coming.
Yeah, you,
Yeah,
you
right
know,
now it's
you
co-
could,
okay.
but we didn't have it that last year.
Okay.
One thing I will say, and to your point, Chairperson Knapp, so the one thing this year that puts us in the situation where we would dip a little bit farther below the 12.5% is that $400,000 contribution for the Green Hill Bridge. And so we won't have the Green Hill Bridge project next year, and at this time, I don't anticipate an equally large project for the warrant that we would consider unassigned fund balance for. And so I am personally not concerned with funding the presented articles with fund balance.
Okay.
Certainly with the recommendation of the ABC. I do think it's important to make sure that we don't dip too far, but
Right.
we have an opportunity this year. I think we have an opportunity this year where there's the 400,000 to offset the 1.6 million from the state, to dip a little bit below with a commitment to come back up. I think it is, I know that the select board supported last year cherry picking a couple of warrant articles to put to a tax rate. I think it's important to tread lightly in that direction. One, it kind of pits departments against one another, even if it is based on what would receive the support. But it might also communicate to residents that the select board sees certain aspects more favorably than others. And so I would just urge you to keep that in mind, and I'm not specifically concerned, especially it would be my recommendation that we take out that $100,000 with a commitment to use the capital reserve. I think that'll make up a little bit of ground. And then next year we'll be in a good situation not having the 400,000 Green Hill Bridge.
I agree. I don't love the idea of doing it. It's where I look at, what do I know people will support? Well, our fire department it does a great job in town, so gets a lot of support from the community for everything that they do, and that's an area I don't stress so much about. Peter?
I think it's playing with numbers a little bit to put warrant articles that you suspect are going to pass without coming from unfunded balance, unreserved fund balance. Again, I think we should anticipate they will pass and they will put us in whatever situation we're going to be in
Right.
with that expenditure. I personally support the idea of not doing the 100,000 for paving, because we have 300,000 in that capital reserve we've been paying into since about 2012, I believe. And that's the extra $5 we pay every time we register a vehicle or a trailer or anything. And again, it's about $300,000. So you could expend from that capital reserve, as Connor said. And we haven't voted on that, we just barely discussed it at our last meeting. But personally, I'd be very much in favor of that.
So, motion to move the fire truck capital reserve forward?
Yes.
So I'll
Second.
second it.
Okay. Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye. Let the minutes reflect that at 7:09, Mr. Air joined the select board meeting. We're
Oh,
going
select
through the,
person.
Good morning.
we're going through the 2020 proposed warrant articles, and we are on 10, and we're going backwards. Bridge and culvert, not going backwards. Bridge and culvert capital reserve for $75,000.
So, it's been recommended by the ABC, we really need it in order to do some of the large work that needs to be accomplished. So, motion to approve Article 10 as a warrant article and place it before the voters.
Second. Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Sorry.
Nap aye, that's all right. Mr. Air?
Air aye.
Bridge culvert.
Air aye.
So 4-0 moving forward. Highway equipment capital reserve for the amount of $100,000. Are there any objections to moving this forward? I'll make a motion to move the highway equipment capital reserve forward.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Air. Roll call vote.
Air aye.
Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye. Paving and related road work. This is the article that we were talking about putting off and using the money received from registrations of automobiles, trailers, etc. So motion to put forward using, not using unassigned fund balance, but using the 300,000 that is
In the reserve
in the
fund?
reserve fund.
So are we changing the wording? Is that your recommendation, Chairperson, now? Removing it entirely?
Yep, and we'll just fund it appropriately.
Is that the recommendation of the ABC?
We haven't had a formal vote on that, but I believe,
Since you have,
I'm awaiting Dan's opinion, but
since you have a full board, would you like to hold for a second and make a decision, or am I putting you on the spot too much for that?
when we have a meeting such as this, are we
Yes,
actually in a public meeting?
yes.
Okay.
Then we could do
I
that,
don't know if that was
That was
Dan's.
my question.
Oh, okay.
but otherwise you'd be okay?
I'm okay
In
with
an
that.
informal vote, Mr. Chairman, please?
By consensus.
Yes.
All right.
And so what I would ask, just so that we reflect it, is if, when the select board makes the motion not to move forward with the paving related road work, you make mention that you make a commitment to use 100,000 from that capital reserve, but also are committed to including that article in the future, in future years, just so if there is a different board, that intent can be carried forward.
So I will make the motion to remove Article 8, paving and related road work, from the current warrant with the intent and commitment of the board that the article will reappear on the warrant in 2021.
And that this 100,000 we are committing to utilize from the actual reserve fund.
Yes, and that too.
Thank you. I'd second that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Haley, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
All right.
I feel like my voice drops just because I'm hanging out with a bunch of...
With all the excitement you're going to.
Library and Community Center Capital Reserve Fund. This was a request to appropriate $200,000.
Has the advisory budget committee weighed in on this?
No. Advisory budget committee, like to have a discussion.
Take a vote. And George, you're over there by yourself.
You may.
To join his group.
I don't know the details of this 200,000. I'm not sure what.
That's part of the reason why we haven't, we didn't have any information about it at all when we last met, so. Could we hear a presentation first?
So the request is, and I can read the article, there was a one page of supporting materials which was added to see if the town will vote to establish a library and community center capital reserve fund under the provisions of RSA 35(1) for the construction of a library and community center, including but not limited to building construction, site work, architectural fees, engineering, permitting, inspection, furniture, commissioning, other expenses, to appropriate the sum of $200,000 to be placed in the fund. This sum to come from unassigned fund balance with no amount to be raised by taxation, and would be conditioned on the passage of the library bond. And in the supporting material, the intent was to cover a portion of the first either interest or principal payment to coincide the impact to taxpayers closer to when the middle school bond is paid off. So the last payment the school will be making on the middle school bond is in October or November of 2022. And so the intention of in the request was to use the 200,000 to make the first payment for towards interest and principal, and the select board would be agents to expend.
Sorry, Carl.
When we did the calculation that dropped us below the 12.5%, did we include this 200,000?
No.
So we would be dropping even further.
To approximately 10.7%.
Correct.
Mr. Ayer?
In my simple mind is, we're referring to the school bond and stuff that we paid off in '22. There's gonna be no savings to the town. If you just go with the cost of living and stuff on the school budget,
It goes up actually more than the amount of reduction for
Right.
what they're paying in the school.
So there's no savings with that school bond when it's paid off. It's be more, costs us more. This is rough numbers, 23 at 3% cost of living on that, or 1%. I tell you, it doesn't add up to me.
In their fiscal year, they budget for 2 payments, and because the last payment is coming October, they're on a fiscal year, July to June. So their last budget will only have 1 payment, not to mention that their payments have been declining over the term of the bond, so.
And that's what I was, so if I could, Chairperson, now. So my question on that was that it's compounded interest, and so as we move towards the end of the bond, the actual impact is very little on what it's costing us to borrow the money as we're making those last few payments?
Correct.
Is that the best way to
It's
kind
still a
of-
few $100,000, but it does reduce. And I have the document in my office that shows the schedule of payments, and I can certainly share that with the board. But I think the biggest impact will be that they're only budgeting in the last fiscal year, they're only budgeting for 1 payment instead of 2, and the payment amounts have declined over the entire term of the borrowing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anything the advisory budget committee would like to add? Mr. Royce?
Have the library trustees established what type of bond and what kind of payment they wish to utilize? Because there are a lot of options
Hang on, I
as
need
far
to
as,
write down what you're saying, Peter. So you're asking if they have, okay.
have they established what payment plan the bond is going to utilize? Because it could be a constant principal payment, it could be a constant payment overall. So that's going to have some impact on what the town is paying if the bond is passed.
So I'll just add 2 things on that. So one, the first point at which that's very important is with estimating the tax rate impact. And so we use the best information that we have available to us at the time. Typically, the bond bank provides a printout based on the town's valuation, the project cost, or the bond request amount, and then provides examples, like Mr. Royce was indicating, saying this is what it would be for a 15-year bond, a 20-year bond, a 30-year bond, etc., and with various payment options. And so my understanding is that the library director has been working with the bond bank with that paperwork. I don't believe a decision has been made, but certainly first a decision would have to be made how to, what is anticipated to be used, and using that for tax rate impact. When the bond is approved, it's the select board that makes the final borrowing determination. All of those things, like bond term and payment type. And so it could be, the select board can make a decision at that time that they feel is in the best interest of the community. Certainly, it would be important to either consider using the same that was used to estimate, or if not, provide explanation for why. A good example is we used a 30-year bond estimation for the town hall project, I believe, and it could be that when we borrow sometime next summer, when the select board negotiates the terms of that borrowing, making the best decision, the decision that's in the best interest of the town at the time could be a 20-year or 25-year, and could be a declining payment over the term. So regardless of how it was presented as a tax rate impact, it's still the select board's decision after a bond is approved on what the terms of that borrowing would be.
Select Person Hardikoff first, and then Mr. Bailey.
So when we keep talking about estimates, do we have the 15-year, 20-year, and 30-year examples yet?
I don't have a copy.
So can we ask for that to be given to us publicly?
Here, if you just want to forward it to my email, I can get it here.
I'm sorry?
I always just said if you want to forward it to my email, I can get it here.
We don't have service, do you? I'm trying to send an email and it won't let me, so I don't know
okay.
if she will be able to.
I know people on the Wi-Fi.
I know people, somebody with a password or something, I don't know.
Right.
In the meantime, while they're working through that, Mr. Bailey?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, and to the, also to Connor. It says here that it's for a capital reserve fund. Now, do we want to start a capital reserve fund, or do we just want to turn around and make this a one payment issue? What would be the correct terminology? Because we're going to do the 200,000, and that's a one-time payment, the way I understand it right now, unless the verbiage has changed.
So DRA allows numerous tools for expenditures like this. The primary purpose would be to make an appropriation that wouldn't lapse at year end, like the operating budget appropriation does. So, you know, an expendable trust would certainly be an option. The reason I would, if there were support to bring this article forward, the reason I would support a capital reserve request is it gives the all involved more flexibility. So an expendable trust would typically have a deadline with a capital reserve, setting the select board as agents to expend, having, you know, you could only spend for that purpose, or you could go back to voters to dissolve the capital reserve if all the money wasn't spent. And so a capital reserve is the most flexible of the tools. And so if there were support to move forward, I would recommend a capital reserve. There aren't a lot of functional differences of it.
Sorry. What I'm looking for is to have a sunset date on this. It says right here in the article in the back part to come from unassigned balance, but then in the end, that is if the library doesn't pass, then this article is void. It says that in it, but we have a capital reserve, and I just think that we need to have a sunset. That's what I'm discussing.
Select person Harrison.
I need to understand something because I've seen at the deliberative session, things change over time. If we bring forward this warrant article, as it's written, does it allow any changes going forward?
Yes, as long as the changes maintain the same topic, subject matter.
That's one of the reasons why, as Connor had mentioned, is the expendable trust. That 200,000, there we go. That's another.
Right, but that doesn't change the ability for
I understand.
us to live through what we did a few years ago.
Can I ask a point of order, town treasurer?
You may?
Okay. Is there a way to appropriate
I'm not in that chair.
I'm sorry. Do you want to move over someplace and be in that
No,
chair?
that's
Because I
okay.
really need an answer to this so I can understand it. Is there any leeway for the select board to appropriate funds for this bill where it cannot be changed at deliberative session?
No,
Not that I'm aware of.
so the intent of the law is certainly that voters make appropriation decisions.
I understand.
Right, okay.
That's why I asked the question.
Mr. Bailey?
Now, this is a wild one, but if we were not to approve this, and we in turn put that 200,000 in our budget to come from the funds. And that way there, we satisfy the use of helping the library on that aspect of it. I know that's in that way that everybody is afforded that, and they would be happy with that. And then we would also have some safeguards with it.
But you don't though, because the
Right.
200,000 is sitting ready to be spent in any other capacity.
Right, it would be at that point, is an SB2 town, the funds get allocated in and then.
I understand how the budget works, but, you know, I for one, if I was to be reelected, I wouldn't vote for that use of that money that way there, so that's why I said it that way. It was just a question, Mr. Chairman.
So the current, these requests, this information from the bond bank is from September, and the number that it uses for the valuation is based on 2018 valuation. As you know, the 2019 valuation went up about 12%, so I can do some quick math to give a more accurate calculation. The payment for a 20-year bond, the annual payment is about $315,000 per year. And so if you divide that through the current assessed value, you'll get the tax rate impact. And then I'll open up the other ones here. So 25 years is about $280,000 a year. And 30 years is about $260,000 a year. So if you give me a minute, I can do the math and give you the three tax rate impacts for that. And this is interest rates for those of you that care. I know some of them will, some of you will. The 20-year bond, which was payments of about $315,000. The interest rate is assumed at 3.75%. The 25-year with payment of approximately $280,000 is 4%. And the 30 years with payments of approximately $260,000 is 4.25%. And
4.25.
4.25. And so that was based on their June 2019 bond sales. As you know, the Fed has reduced interest rates, I believe, twice since then?
Yes.
Twice? Okay. So if that trend continues, you know, you might expect those to be lower rates, but Melissa and I can get updated copies of these documents, which will reflect after their December bond sale. And we'll be able to see how those interest rates were impacted by the Fed reduction.
I would also like to see the figure of total interest paid at the 20-year, total interest paid at the 25-year, total interest paid at the 30-year.
Get your pen ready.
Okay.
Okay. 20-year total interest paid is $1.918 million.
Got it.
25-year total interest paid $2.615 million.
On interest.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Okay. 30.
30-year $3.433 million.
Did you get that figure again, please?
3.433.
Okay.
Wow.
It's a lot of business.
Takes money anyway.
That's-
Clearly. So we don't have the advisory budget committee's response on this. Do you have a response hearing those rates and those percentages?
What do you think? Want to have a meeting to do that, or improvise here, or what's your pleasure?
I'm a little confused, but that's okay.
We probably should defer and have a meeting.
Okay. So is it possible for our board to defer on Article 7?
So a decision would need to be made by the select board by the December 16th meeting. So no later than the December 16th meeting in order to finalize the warrant, the budget and the warrant going to deliberative session, or going to the public hearing,
Yeah.
excuse me.
So,
The board could change their mind after it was decided.
I can meet anytime.
okay, but,
But if we need-
so just as a point of
Just
order
this one
again,
topic.
putting this forward and approving it allows at deliberative session any amount that could be changed to the
Correct.
4.7.
Yes.
Correct.
We just plotted against you, George, man.
I'm just really uncomfortable with that.
Whatever date you decide.
5:30 tomorrow night, can you meet?
Yes, 5:30 tomorrow night, I'll make it.
Okay, thank you.
So the
town
trouble, the trouble with
24
that,
hours.
yes, the trouble that we couldn't, it would have to
Oh,
be.
we don't have 24 hours.
Yeah, it'd have to be.
7:30. 8:30. What time is it?
7:30.
7:30.
So how about Wednesday? Anything on Wednesday? Can we meet at 5?
Yeah, I think 4:30.
4:30?
Usual time.
4:30 Wednesday?
If not,
I'll call if I get
All right, so I will make it public notice then that Wednesday at 4:30 at the town hall.
Yep.
And that'll be our only item on the agenda other than approving our last minute.
All
Okay.
right.
Wednesday, 4:30.
Thank you, guys.
And so that will be, so this $200,000 request from unassigned fund balance will be considered by the board on December 16th.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, bring forward Article 6 to be be presented to our voters as a warrant article, since we need a bridge.
You may, and I will second the motion.
Thank you.
Air aye.
Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye.
We have can we get an update too of the red listed bridges after this one is done? How many others?
Real easy, 0.
That's a great answer.
We do have a red listed, we have a red listed culvert.
We'll deal with our culverts later, but this is our last bridge
Two
requiring
listed
$2 million
culverts.
worth of work. Thank you.
But we do have one more project in the state bridge aid project currently, which is the Old Settlers. Currently, it's I believe it's 2 culverts. I think it's 2 granite block culverts right now. Will be replaced with a bridge. The last update from DOT is their money will be available, I believe, in 2028. So it'll be a while before voters see a request for specific appropriation, but that's a much smaller project.
Yes, but we'll have culvert stuff to deal with between now and then.
Absolutely, yes.
Operating budget. Select person Hardikoff.
Does the operating budget as it's displayed here in front of me on Article 5, 7.3847, include any adjustments that we may or may not make based on our comp study?
It's a great question. So at the beginning of the budget process, I put a placeholder of $50,000 in, which is included in that request. The compensation study task force will be meeting tomorrow to consider the preliminary results. If all recommendations from the compensation study were approved, the current impact is $40,000. So there's enough money currently as a placeholder in the operating budget to fund the recommendations, but that would still require an action by the board. That's not finalized.
I would like to consider going December 16th on this one also. I'd make a motion that we defer this to December 16th.
I would actually second that motion.
Okay.
Air aye.
Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye. Stormwater assessment management, this is to appropriate the sum of $30,000 to defray the costs of planning, only to move forward, should we receive the, I guess, grant money for it? Correct. Select person there.
Yes, I think GES is tightening up on certain aspects and stuff in the future and stuff, so we need to prepare for it. There has been some changes and stuff, so it's good to be ready for it.
So is that a motion?
Yep.
So I have a motion from the select person there. I will second that motion.
Can I ask why we have not had a weigh-in from the advisory budget committee on this one?
This was considered at the last select board meeting, so I didn't include it in the slate of warrant articles until there was support from the select board. And so certainly this is something that would be put to the advisory budget committee for recommendation.
Then we could add to their agenda for Wednesday?
Be careful.
I know, sorry.
Come on out.
No, that would be fine.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
December.
I'd like to defer it to December 16th, along with the others in the warrant article.
I will pull my second on that since since we're already talking about other items, I don't see this as being a big deal. Although I also assume this one's probably gonna rocket forward.
Students still have support. Then, you want to table it.
I think the request was to table it until the 16th.
Are you willing to pull your motion?
Yeah, I'm willing to table it.
All right, so table to the 16th.
Thank you.
And can we get that information as soon as possible?
Absolutely.
And Article 3, Library and Community Center Bond.
Do we have to vote to defer Article to 16? I mean, Article 4 to go to the 16?
Yes, we can vote on it.
Hey,
It's deferred, I'm good with it, but
Okay,
roll call
that's-
vote. That's fine, roll call vote.
To defer
To
what?
defer stormwater assessment management to the 16th.
Okay.
Yeah, they're aye.
Bailey, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye. All right, Library and Community Center Bond for 4.676 million, 4.6 million. Select person Hardikoff.
So this article is not recommended by the advisory budget committee. I personally have a question about the 4.6 gross budget And I'm wondering if there is the possibility that we reduce that amount, eliminating the contingency. Everyone's staring at me.
So that was, yeah, so that was the number provided by the library trustees. I think that request would be best suited for the library trustees to consider. I do have the current budget document, which I believe is either on the trustees' website or the foundation website, which indicates that the contingency included from for the 2020 project versus the 2019 project reflects a reduction. Trying to find it here. On the total contingency included in the budget in 2019 was 12.5% of construction, and in 2020 it's at 11.7. I'm looking for that. Owner contingency. So the amount's actually the same. The reason that the percent is reduced is because the price went up. Right, okay, thank you. So the owner's contingency in 2019 was 300,000, and in 2020, it's proposed at 300,000. So that represents a $300,000 of the 4.676 million.
Are there any other questions from the select board? Mr. Ayer?
So we have to put this 16 through with all the information that is already tabled?
Not at this point.
You want a motion?
If there is, or right now it's open for discussion.
Okay, sorry.
I would still like to see us reduce the amount that we put before the voters by the contingency, and then make a final, can I ask, can someone share with me what the pending balance is on the committed funds from private donations?
I believe it's on the warrant article.
So the most
41.
most updated information I have is 241,000.
That is sitting in an account currently.
Yes,
I would like to know what the uncollected committed balance is.
241 plus 163.
So
404, I believe,
163.
163,000,
That is expected over the next 12 months to be collected.
correct.
So I'll ask again, does the possibility exist to reduce the appropriated sum? So take the 4.6 million, subtract the 300,000, and that still leaves you with your 163,000 to collect and use as a contingency. Does that make sense? Am
I'm
I
sorry.
making sense?
I feel like I heard something.
Okay.
I just feel, they're talking to me too, so I didn't hear what you said. Can you repeat yourself? Sorry.
So currently before us
Yep.
is an article at 4.676377. 300,000 of that is a contingency fund.
Is the owner's contingency, there's also a construction management contingency as
Okay.
well.
So what's the total contingency?
I believe it's $450,000. We were,
So would you be willing to reduce this figure by the 450,000, leaving you with the 163 that you're left to collect in committed funds as contingency?
I need to speak with the architect, the legal team, because, what? I'm sorry.
Also, part of this whole project was in our budget that Connor received and Dan received at the question and answer session.
If you wouldn't mind, just to, so people who are watching this can see you, Melissa. Thank you.
The money that is raised by the foundation that we will have is also, has been earmarked for all the FF&E, the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment. And we took that completely out of the budget last year so that we could reduce, or we lowered it. No, we took it out because it's the FF&E that we were gonna
Do you
use.
see FF&E on your?
It should say zero, right?
What does it say?
Furniture library is 50,000. Furniture stacks is 50,000. Decorating is 0, phone system 6,000, computer system 20,000, security system 6,500, equipment 30,000, moving 15,000.
So the money raised by the foundation was going to cover most of the FF&E that we had earmarked for the project. So that way, that wouldn't be part of the 241 that would be made available to us as of February 1st, 2020. That was been earmarked for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment.
So then it's not really available to be part of the actual sum of the gross budget.
Well, it's going to continue to grow, because we're gonna get more, because people have the opportunity to pay.
You're not understanding what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that any of the private funds that you have committed or collected are not part of the actual building of this library.
They are. I don't understand.
I don't understand what you're asking, I'm sorry.
Okay, if you have $241,000 collected.
Yeah.
And you have earmarked that for FFE,
Mm-hmm.
and part of your budget is not written to include $241,000 in the FFE, then this is not part of the 4.676.
No, it is, because
Am I
we have to,
misunderstanding this?
we have to report the total amount of the project in our bond request, which is the 4.6, which is offset by 241. As far as I've understood, the bond bank doesn't matter which category that money goes into. It's just that there's $241 that will be removed from the total bond amount for, we're asking the bond.
For the 4,435,377 amount. That would be the bonded amount.
Right.
If I could add some clarity, I think it just goes back to the point of money being fungible. So in the library community, that money has been earmarked for the FF&E, but the money's fungible, so simply spending that money for that aspect of the project makes money available for others. So I think it's materially insignificant what that money's spent for. I think what Select Person Hardikoff was indicating is that if the contingency, if the $300,000 contingency was taken out, and the bond amount was approved at the 4.6 minus the 241, and you anticipate collecting an additional 160,000, then that 160,000 would make up a little bit more than half of the 300 you took out because of the contingency. So I think it was a proposal saying reduce it by 300, knowing that you'll likely end up with the 160, which gets you most of the way there and would be available to it. I think Melissa's point is the project cost still needs to be, the voters still need to raise and appropriate the full amount for the project. So if the 300, whatever, that extra 160,000 would still have to be accepted by the voters somehow.
You do it a subsequent
In the
select
future,
board meeting.
or I would have to double check. I'm pretty sure the voters would have to approve that money. The select board are authorized to accept gifts. The town voted that warrant article in, but I could verify that. But I think that's what Melissa was trying to say, so hopefully that adds some clarity.
Select Person Hardikoff?
So if there's 241,000 for FF&E, but your budget here is indicating that there's 177.5 that you're expecting for FF&E, then there's also an amount there that can reduce the proposed appropriated sum for the library bill.
Correct, which I believe, if you want me to.
No, go ahead.
Sorry. It was explained to us throughout this whole process that we know that there is going to be more monies coming into us throughout the entire life of the project. So if we were under the knowledge that we could, if we even got more money in the future, maybe we could use that money to make a payment instead of having the town make a payment. Like, there were other ways that we could utilize this money moving forward, because it's a gift after we've gone to construction or gone to bond.
So,
And I really appreciate your confusion, because this is what I've had to learn over
so
the last year and a half.
I absolutely, and this is me speaking as an individual select person and as a resident of this town. This is not me speaking for the select board. I would like to see this project with the lowest figure possible in order to accomplish the project and present it as a warrant article to the residents of the town where it is so spot on and at its lowest figure possible that it's much easier for them as voters to embrace this. And I speak only for myself in saying that. At 54% of support last round, we only need to address a few voters in the town in order for the project to go forward. And I have to be honest with you, I think that you need to go back and drill down your numbers, bring it before the advisory budget committee one more time, and come in with that lowest figure possible where there isn't the possibility of, for lack of a better term, any slush built into this figure. Because, as we all know, the library is a really important thing in a community. And I personally feel as a select person that bringing something forward that reflects an exact amount that we're asking of our residents is our responsibility. Am I making sense?
You're making sense.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm learning this as we go. The contingency is in place so that if anything is to come up, right, like we're digging and something happens, that's where that money is taken from, out of the budgeted contingency, correct?
I mean, it really just goes back to money being fungible.
Right.
I think, yeah, the money would have to come from somewhere.
Right.
If you budget for a contingency, it would make sense that it would come out of that. I think if you didn't budget for a contingency and encountered problems, then you'd have to make cuts somewhere else.
Sure. Do you know, Connor, if it's legal to go forward with no contingency? Because it was explained to us in a way that we had to have a contingency, an owner's contingency, and I've already sent an email to the architect and to the construction management firm, and we will forward it in the morning to our people at the bond bank or whomever else we need to, but it was always our understanding that there was a certain number that you had to have in contingency, and we cut it down as low as we believed legally that was what we were allowed to do. So I'm willing to absolutely entertain that, but I think we need to find out if legally we need to do it or not.
Specific answer to your question is I don't know if
Yep.
there's any legal. I certainly can't think of anything. I think from the perspective of certainly the architect and the construction manager, it's certainly in their best interest to have a contingency in the project. An architect doesn't want to be involved in a project where they're going to end up in a situation where they don't have the money to build it. You know, it's not something that they want, and they report on numbers to other customers, potential customers. Same thing with a construction manager. So I believe that they certainly urged having a healthy contingency. You know, I don't think a contingency is uncommon at all in a construction project. But I'm not specifically aware of a legal requirement, but I'll be honest and say I don't know.
Sure.
Select person Bailey, then select person Hardikoff, then select person Air.
Good evening. One of the items we have here is that, to remember, is that the board voted to go right up until before the presentation to the voters to allow you to change this original 241 here. So you can change that up to the day that we present it to the public. We've said that. We said that. So right now with the 241-163, and if you take your FF&E off of the slip that was given to us for $177,500, there's $63,663 more than the $177,000 that you're asking for your original FF&E. So if you were to take that money, it would also help to slide that over and help lower the original cost of the building. And then again, it would make it, going along with what Tracy was saying, select person Hardikoff was saying, it would make it more feasible to present to the government, because somebody else besides myself can come up, look at this thing and say, the term was used, slush. So this way it takes it out of there. It's just another consideration for everybody to look at. Because you're already ahead of your FF&E, so they're there. And then if this passes, and then the other 200,000 will be used for you'll have more than enough to turn around and make this work if we just get the rest of these numbers together.
Select person Hardikoff.
So what I see is the possibility of presenting to our voters 4.149877. By reducing the 300,000 contingency, by realizing that you have committed funds of another 163,000 you'll be collecting, and by reducing the difference between what you've got here of 241 for FF&E and what you've proposed at 177.5 for your furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And then you would be bringing before the voters a 4.149877, 13,000 square foot building.
Mhm.
Which is still high, but at 319 a square foot, much more palatable than 346 a square foot.
322 a square foot.
Sorry, 322,
Yes.
the 4.67637.
Oh, I did 4.7.
Sorry, okay, so,
4.1879.
and I understand that the excitement that could be taking place right now is with 2 drops in the Federal Reserve rate, you may be coming back to us and telling us, I gotta find the figure, but that the 3.75% might actually be somewhere around 3.25 because we love it when the feds drop rates.
Mhm.
And so imagine if we could present 4.1 at 3.25 and the school bond is done and we've already got 54% of our population on board with this. So I think to do your due diligence and do this project the best service it deserves to be presented to our voters, and again, I'm speaking as one individual select person and as a resident, I would love to see you go back, crunch these numbers, and bring us a warrant article that is really spot on if we can.
And that would be due by next Monday. Our next trustee meeting is not by then. I will do my best to get everyone together to try to do that. There was discussion already about reducing the total cost of the proposed project by the 163, knowing that
This is $500,000.
I'm understanding
It's
that. I fully understand what you're
okay.
saying, definitely. I'm telling you my due diligence will be to make sure that we legally can do it, and then to try to convene the trustees in the next 4 days to get a meeting. Yeah, but we were planning to vote to potentially bring down the proposed budget by the 163 because we're confident that we're going to get that 163 in the next year.
Sure.
So that was already on our docket for our next meeting, because it was my understanding that, like you said earlier, we could change these numbers going down up until the end of January. We just can't go up.
Select person there.
All right, I'm gonna ask for follow-up on this. But this is my observation, my thing. And I hate to, don't take me as being negative. But, I went to the meeting and stuff, and I was understanding the square footage and stuff. I was trying to do the square footage and stuff. It doesn't work out, and so with the different numbers, we bounced around stuff. And then information was provided to me in the sheets and stuff, and you take accountability for this, that adds up, it's roughly figured in there. And I highly suggest you keep a contingency on this, because there's no rock solid numbers. The plans are not ready to go out to bid and stuff. The rest estimates and stuff, they covered everything. So if you try doing square footage, it does not work. It doesn't come out right and stuff. But they did allow for this, allow for this, allow for this. There's no rock numbers.
Right, if you look at the square footage as it currently is, you're looking at $360 a square foot for an ICF building that is relatively open in nature.
This doesn't match that. I think we need accurate numbers. I would like to table warrant article 3.
So do you guys understand what I'm trying to say? I'm not trying to be negative, but move around, you cannot do a square footage price.
Right.
And you could, different scenarios and stuff, bring everything in and stuff, and then you're gonna need a contingency on this.
Because
You don't have rock solid plans put out the bid yet.
we don't have architectural plans.
They have plans, conceptual
You have a
stuff.
conceptual drawing, but not architectural?
We have not purchased the plans. I believe we don't purchase the plans until the vote passes.
and then that goes out to bid and stuff, so then you would have a better, if you had rough plans right now, you get more rock solid numbers, but you cannot do that right now. And they kinda addressed everything, different things in there and stuff, and put it in, and then it was a 7% increase from last year due to construction and stuff. Then if you try to do it in a square footage, it does not work out.
Right, we are building it based on a number not to exceed.
Right.
I do know, and I think we had mentioned this in our budget presentation before, the numbers that were presented originally for our warrant article, the project management firm, the construction management firm that we've been working with Batwin, took all the bits and pieces of what makes the new library building, and did heating ideas and that sort of thing. And we did get figures that were, like Dan said, they were estimates from the people that they often subcontract work out to. So when they came back to us and said the total project would be 7% more than last year for construction, they were pretty confident in that 7% number. And I know, last year we went from, I believe, 20 to 25% contingency, and now we're down to, I can't really say 12 or 11%. We have cut that. That was one of the first things we did look at last year when we were coming forward this year. So we have looked at our contingency, just so you know that we did look at that, knowing that that sometimes can be like, why do we, I think last year we were about $500,000 in contingency between the construction firm and the owner's contingency total. So we did bring that amount down, but I think I have to look at other numbers and come back with an updated warrant article request.
I make a motion to table this.
So a motion to table till the 16th. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Ayer.
There, I.
Bailey, aye.
Article 5.
Nap aye.
Thank you.
And then if there's any feedback that ADC would like to provide, please review that at your meeting on Wednesday and get back to us on that, any additional feedback. All right, first of two public comments, just a reminder that public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. And I open public comment. Going once, twice. All right. Staff report, review of minutes for December 2nd. I have one item that I would just like to note on the minutes. On page 2 under appointments in the advisory budget committee, we have unassigned fund balance, and then a little farther down refer to it as UFB, but do not put it as UFB in parentheses right after unassigned fund balance. So if you would please just add that in. Otherwise, I had no issues with the minutes. Mr. Bailey?
Thank you very much. I have, when Mr. Kinders was making his comments, I asked to have it put in here under public comment, and I asked personally, because Mr. Kinders, as we know, said that he was representing the trustees, and then I would like to see if added is if anyone from the library trustees is present, to please raise their hand, and that was accomplished. I would like to have that put into the record so that at least I feel legally we did our due diligence instead of allowing a non-elected individual represent the library without having the library have their permission to do this. If that could be done, I would appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
We can add that note, and there's one name spelling correction in the minutes as well, so we can make those adjustments and bring them for signature for the board at the December 16th meeting.
I'm assuming the name spelling correction was, where was it? I
Challenge you.
What's that?
Yeah, it's going to challenge. No, Dan and Mantrack is spelled correctly.
Is it?
It was Lee Elliott.
L-E-I-G.
I've spelled Mr. Mantrack's name enough times to
It's usually the case.
yeah.
So would you remind me to recuse myself forget what we're voting on.
Well, I
Yeah.
think we can,
I was
we
absent.
can, vote on it now with
Yes.
the
Okay.
changes as noted.
Yes.
I will
So,
recuse myself since I was
uh,
not
Abstain.
If
Will
you'll
abstain.
Yes.
Thank you all.
So, Nap aye.
Haley, aye.
Never I.
Alright. Moving right along. Staff reports.
So only two quick items, everything else is on the agenda. First item, three quick items. First item is property taxes. Again, reminder, bills are due December 16th. Special recognition for our tax collector, Linda Markowitz. She's working that office alone as we have a staff member out with a new baby.
Oh,
And
how
so
exciting.
she's doing an excellent job managing the office very well. We've heard very positive feedback from the folks that march in and give us a few $1,000. So I think that's a testament to Linda's customer service expertise.
She does know her stuff.
Congratulations to
Yes.
Mama, Papa, and new baby.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I'll pass that along. Thank you.
And Big Brother, right?
Big Brother, like,
Never
memory.
forget that.
Good memory.
Yes, Mr.
I'll contest to what he's saying, because I went out paying my taxes today, and I got a nice little smiley face on my paper stamp, and a smile from her.
Glad to hear. The second item is just an update on the compensation study. So Municipal Resources Incorporated is finalizing the report and recommendations from the compensation study. The compensation study task force will meet this week to review the findings and prepare a recommendation for the select board. And the select board will be presented with the findings of the compensation study and recommendation from the task force at the December 16th meeting.
May I ask, would the rest of the select board also like to see the impact of that study on benefits?
Absolutely.
So when it's presented to the select board, could we have that as well?
The impact of the wages on benefits. specifically.
Correct.
I understand, yes.
So I'm assuming we'll see an increase in the benefits line based on the fact that
Absolutely.
if we were to accept everything that was there, we would see a $40,000 increase, which should also directly impact the benefits.
Yep, no question. So last item is the December work anniversaries, which I neglected to read last week, and I'll read this week. Our fire chief, Rick Walker, 19 years. He's been in town a lot longer, serving in the fire department, but that is as an employee, the records that we have. Bob Brown, the highway department, who currently serves in a part-time capacity at 12 years. David Getchell, the custodian, the public safety building for 7 years. Your packet incorrectly lists Susan Miliotto, a library desk clerk at 7 years, actually 2 years, my mistake. I'll have it corrected for December 16th. Brian Dodier in the highway department, and I believe I actually spelled Brian's name wrong, it's B-R-Y-A-N. Highway department for 6 years. Brian Badgley in the fire department, 6 years. Christopher Waring in the fire department, 1 year, and Jake Roeder in the fire department, 1 year.
Alrighty. Office Administrator Cottle.
For your signature, I have payroll manifest for check date 12/519, AP manifest for check date 12/619, a notice of intent to cut wood or timber, and 3 abatements to make corrections due to the 2019 revaluation.
Alright, moving on to old business, electronic time and attendance. There was a discussion around it that the total cost for software purchase is approximately $5,300 with an annual cost of around $6,700.
So the information I presented last meeting, and it was tabled to attract more board members present, was the pricing details show a 25% discount for the software purchase, as requested by the select board. The technology committee was also asked for for a review of the information. I heard back from Will Lenhart, a member of the technology committee, who indicated that the pricing was reasonable when compared to the cost of manual timesheet processing, and he supported the transition to get information faster, electronically manage it, and protect the data from multiple user entry issues.
If the select board doesn't mind me holding off for 1 second, just to ask the advisory budget committee some of their general feedback on it, knowing this will have an indirect budget impact in the utilization of time and resources.
We can add that to our agenda. We haven't discussed it at all.
Is there anything else we can give you guys to do on Wednesday?
I like having you guys sitting
I'm
here
gonna bring
Just one item.
peddling stuff up.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep,
Peter, we just thought we need to have that catch-all phrase in the bottom, but anything else that we should discuss, bring up so we would be covered on the agenda.
And other issues as assigned.
Details of an agenda actually aren't required by right to know to be posted, just the fact that you're meeting.
Right.
We do a good job indicating certainly what the select board, topics the select board will cover, but you're not restricted to those topics.
select person there.
On the information provided, in my simple mind and stuff, I don't see a savings for all departments on this. Logging in and stuff, 'cause I only have one magic finger, and other people do too. But I don't see the savings and the expense of this, interacting and stuff. I just can't comprehend it. I think some departments longer. I'm gonna spend more time, so as long as I save money in them departments.
So if you don't mind, the real savings and impact is in the fact that currently they have paper records that they have to deliver to town hall, and then the town hall has to process, manually input all of that paper. This, everyone is doing it electronically, and then you just click a button, it sends it, and then they go in, they have access to all of it. Like I use an ADP system, and then I go in and I approve all my employees' time cards, and if a member of my staff is out, so if you had a department head who is out, they can assign it to Connor to go in and approve employee timesheets if they were gonna be on vacation or wherever. And rather than him having to chase down all the time cards, or someone else in the department to do it, they would go into the computer, do their time, and then Connor would go in and approve their time cards, and then payroll would be able to process them. Select person Hardikoff.
The other cost savings involved in this is in the reduction of employee law litigation. Each time a Department of Labor might choose to do an audit of us, the reduction in employee retrieval of information when they're applying for their own mortgages, car loans, anything like that. And the reality is there have been multiple studies done that when you actually use an electronic time record with a fob, you gather much more appropriate work hours. And by that I mean, I assume we're either gonna do the round up or down to the quarter hour or to the minute on payroll as it's presented to you, whatever you choose. But that methodology, it reduces the cost of actual payroll, and overall, when Lynn goes to do any type of Primex workers' comp audit, all of the information is there, and we may actually even see a Primex reduction in our liability insurance by having something like this. You can always request a 10% reduction in liability because you're utilizing a system like this. Don't know if they'll approve it, but it's definitely something to go for, so.
Thank you for feedback from both of you.
Is there any feedback from the board?
I have none.
I'm assuming then at this point the board would like to wait till the 16th to allow the ABC time to review it?
Yes.
Police Department renovation review.
So, to remind the board and the community, based on the results of a lean review, Select Board supported a short-term renovation of the existing police department space with a commitment to continue planning for a long-term solution. In March of 2019, the Select Board placed a warrant requesting $50,000 to be added to the $31,000 available in the capital reserve account. And upon passage, the town had $81,000 available for the police department renovation. Upon completion, the project cost was $73,665, which leaves $8,000 remaining in the capital reserve account. I attached a budget breakout of expenditures, which indicates what the original budget was, what the actual cost was. I'll draw your attention down to the bottom. The construction addition of $3,260 was in conjunction with the IT infrastructure improvements. So those expenditures are seen up above in the actual costs, mainly in electrical. But details the description of that. Special thank you, he's not here tonight, but for Chief Williams. The Deputy Chief contributed a lot also, but Chief Williams really stepped in as the general contractor upon the sudden departure of the school facility manager. And so while the project took a little longer than anticipated, It was accomplished within budget and improved safety separation and the use of the existing space. I will say, and I'll certainly invite select board members to schedule a time with the deputy chief or chief to see the space. Most of the punch list items have been resolved. There's an outstanding issue with the prisoner toilet, which is not currently functional. So we'll continue to work with the plumber and the manufacturer to rectify the issue.
I was told that there's a pump that's needed for it due to water pressure. It's about $1,000.
You have more information than I do, and so I think we'll continue to pursue that issue, hopefully within the budget approval.
It would be terrible if I made an inappropriate joke about the most recent discussion of having to flush toilet 50.
10 or 15
Completely inappropriate, okay.
Still coming in under budget, which I, even with the repair, which is appreciated, and I do look forward to going down and seeing it because I know it's been about 3 years in the making to get you.
Absolutely.
Alrighty.
Or second.
No new business. Election of elected and appointed officials with expiring terms. Mr. Bailey,
read this?
Select Person Hatch. The Trustee of Trust Funds, Patricia Gingrich. Cemetery Trustee, Rick Walker. Library Trustee, Lindsay Maziar and Tracy Bisson. The Town Moderator, Ron St. Jean. And the Supervisor of the Checklist, Milda Janelle. And all of them are 3-year terms with the exception of the Town Moderator, which is a 2-year term, and the Supervisor of the Checklist, which is a 6-year term.
And I will just specifically point out that the filing period for town offices, elected town offices, is from Wednesday, January 22nd, 2020 through Friday, January 31st, 2020. And that Friday deadline, the office will be open for filing from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. So the absolute deadline to file for elected office is Friday, January 31st at 5 p.m.
Alrighty.
It's only 9 days.
Yes,
It's always
set by the Secretary of
Before
State.
5 p.m.
Yes, so those of you who like to
Excuse me.
read, digest a lot of material, please consider if you'd like to.
And we have a request for a reverse involuntary lot merger for map 104 lot 6, which is required under RSA that we unmerge the involuntary merger of those lots. And it was written in as a formal request. So I'll make a motion to unmerge map 104 lot 6.
I'll second it.
Here, I.
Bailey, no.
Hardikoff, aye.
Map I. Passes 4-1, or 3-1. Really losing it here. Select person's report. Select person there.
All right. You guys ready?
Yes, sir.
I apologize, I overslept. Thanks for a couple calls on it, but it didn't work. And I didn't attend conservation last Thursday, but I looked at the minutes and stuff on it and updated on there. We have some serious issues, I feel, personally as a citizen and then being liaisons. The conservation, their consensus, they don't want to fund any of the dam repairs. I want to thank the TA and stuff, he's been put in contact with the state. They're not going to fine us, well, we keep moving forward and stuff, but we need to act on this now. We cannot put it off any longer. Repairs and stuff need to be redone, or put the taxpayer, burden on the taxpayers, we lower or drain the dam. Because this is gonna be ongoing and stuff, and we're very lucky the state is working with us. They're gonna not stop working with us. We need to budget money for this and stuff, to deal with it. Connor's been doing a good job on getting out estimates and stuff. He has more information on the due dates and stuff. I have a private individual, who's engineers who topoed them all on the water level and stuff. So I have more ideas, so when we're talking to people with a bid on it, we'll have a better rough idea. And then going through the minutes and stuff, right through there, so they want to donate couple $100,000 for a future purchase land of Layton and Stratford. Majority of the land in Stratford and Barrington. It's kind of landlocked. It's off old settlers. This is my personal opinion. I cannot support it because I don't see any benefit for the town. Majority of it's going to be in Stratford. And we're having a problem managing what we have right now. So I don't think we should be taking on any more. It's my personal thoughts. Till we be able to control what we have. This is starting to get out of control here. And thanks to the hard work of the TA, he's at the state satisfied for today. Tomorrow could be a different story. So we need to start acting on this now.
Is there anything that the TA would like to add to Select Person Ayer's report?
Yeah, so two things. One, Select Person Ayer indicated the advertisement for engineering services for the dam. The deadline is December 18th at noon. So I've heard from a variety of engineering services with questions. I'm going to issue an addendum on December 12th with answers to those questions. The Conservation Commission has already voted and committed up to $10,000. My understanding is, Select Person Ayer indicated at their most recent meeting, by consensus, they agreed that they're not comfortable funding anymore, and certainly not the entire project. I reached out to the chair of the Conservation Commission, Ken Grossman. I had a meeting with him on Thursday to discuss the matter further. When I attended the Conservation Commission about a month ago, I urged them to make a determination if it was their intent or not to fund the repairs necessary for the Richardson Pond Dam, and if not, come before the Select Board and make that clear, because from my perspective, it has to be paid for. This is work that we need to do, and finding out, waiting until bills start coming due to figure out who's going to pay for it, I think is not appropriate. So when I explained at the Conservation Commission meeting that all involved need to understand that it's all the taxpayers' money, so that $322,000 that is sitting in the Conservation Fund, that's taxpayer money. That's land use change tax that's gone into that Conservation Fund, been directed into that Conservation Fund, and is foregone revenue to the town. And so the Conservation Commission oversees as the fiduciary for that fund, but making the decision that that money which is in an account and ready to be used, not using that money for repairs on this conservation property, opposed to raising taxes in order to pay for the necessary repairs, is something that the Conservation Commission and Select Board will need to make a determination about. So I will report back after my meeting with the Conservation Commission Chair on Thursday, once I have a better understanding. Regardless, I'm still moving forward. I intend to bring a recommendation for engineering services at our first meeting in January, and engage those services to better understand the engineering costs and the construction cost of the work that's necessary.
I would like to make sure that, at least from my position, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels, that we emphasize the fact that when they take on these properties, that they are also expected to maintain them, and they expressed that that was their intent upon taking these properties. So to come back and not uphold their end of the agreement with taking these properties, I will make sure that I personally fight tooth and nail that they will use their funds appropriately to pay for the work that's necessary on the Richardson Dam, or I will fully support draining the dam to make it appropriate for the state. Anybody else have anything they would like to
Please.
say? Mr. Bailey?
After Mr. Ayer brought this up several meetings ago, I went and had a conversation with TA Connor and discussed the fact that I would like to have a copy of all three of the last petition warrants that were put in and were voted on by the town voters. And secondly, after doing that, I was recommended that I go ahead and I read the RSA as to what the money was to be used for. The RSA in particular for the conservation revolving fund. And going along with what you said, Mr. Chairman, there is stipulations in there on how it goes and what have you. But there is also a little caveat that allows you to slide out of it. So that was the reason why I was asking to have a copy of all those to be given. So I could turn around and review, and I think it would be appropriate for the board to have.
It's pretty clear on the maintenance and management of the
Yes, it
property.
is, it is. But I just want to make sure we have all our ducks in water, and we say, this is it, so we get the projects done, because as Mr. Ayer just stated, they're planning on buying property that's out of town, which really is not going to have any value to us.
So a little bit in Barrington too, though.
Oh, yes, it is. I said some of it, yes, I understand that, and some of it's here. But with that happening, you know, I think that a closer look should be here, because I don't believe that the tail should wag the dog. Thank you.
Select person there.
Only like, I want to realize, we need to act on this now, no matter what and stuff. And Connor has done a lot of hard work, there's a lot of other volunteers to pull this together. We're not getting fined today, but we should get fined if we put it off. So we're gonna have to act on this,
The letter had it.
or we're gonna get fined.
I will fully acknowledge I'm a little chapped about it because this letter came up over a year ago, and so I said over a year. And consistently, we have been applying pressure about the fact that they needed to get moving on that and get engineering going. And here we are again at the 11th hour without anything done to move forward, which means typically when you wait that long, your costs also go up because you're doing it under the gun and under pressure. So I do not support the position they've taken on it or the position they've put the select board in. I think it is negligent, and I don't appreciate it. Select person Bailey, sorry.
I have nothing to report.
Select person Hardikoff.
I'm going to take this opportunity to formally request that the Recreation Commission post their meeting minutes in draft form within 24 hours of their meeting, and then update the meeting minutes when the Rec Commission meets and approves them. Because as year end approaches, there is a cross-scheduling of the meetings, I end up with very little ability to review the commission's work as the select board representative to that group. I know that it has been requested, and now I am formally and publicly requesting that these steps be followed under right to know.
Is that a motion?
It doesn't need to be a motion.
I'll second it.
No, it doesn't need to be a motion. It is a formal request under public right to know, please. And the school board, select person Hatch takes the second one of each month, and I don't know if she attended. No, okay.
All right. Yes, Mr. Ayer.
I agree with the select person hot dog, because I was able to give my report by all the minutes that I read from conservation. I was out there, I had all the data right there, wham. And it was all factual and true, and that's what happened that night. So I agree with you, your stand on it, thank you.
All right. So the planning board, there was a continuance for wildlife encounters till February 18th.
Is there a reason why there's a continuance?
Well, there were a few things going on. There's some litigation.
Oh, details to work out, okay.
Yeah, with the property, and they're working on closing on the property so that it will come out of the current owner's name and move into their name. Also, there was the TurboCam application, which I was recused from before the board, and there was a review of the design documents for that, and they are not ready for board approval at this point, so they're continuing to work through that process. There was a parcel on Franklin Pierce Road, which was a request for a home business for antiques and glass company, which was approved. And then there was also a request before the board for a property that would be moving forward with high-end storage units. And if anyone would like to see them, I brought a printed out design. And these are geared for people with RVs and other
Where's that being
expensive toys.
proposed?
Car collectors?
Car collectors, yes, it will be down past, just past Renaissance Firearms,
And there's a Volvo dealer there near the town line.
in between
Oh,
the two.
in behind, okay.
Yes, tucked back in.
How interesting. You've moved from high-end housing to high-end storage. Okay.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it before.
I
So
hadn't,
new.
I had heard of it, but only in like really affluent areas and never realized that we fit that mold around here.
The only thing,
If you take Route 3 and over by what used to be the weather vane, right in that area, they have a huge one
Merrimack.
right there. Merrimack, thank you. They have a huge one right there.
do we have a right to request a statement of purpose for buildings like that so that it can't go from the intended purpose of approval to something else in the future?
It's drafted right in the information for it, like, and there's condo documents associated with that, so that
Very good.
it can't deviate from its
Very good.
purpose.
Site, they also have a site, they
Uh,
have to do some-
So that was the planning board meeting. Just so everyone is aware, currently on the agenda for the 17th would be the items that were pushed off. Oh, no, sorry, that one is not on for the 17th. There is a parking area for CB Bridge that's on before the board, and just a request for the planning board to amend the, I believe it's the 100-year, or the 100, request for 100 feet from small pools and other things of that sort. Like wetland pools, things of that.
Vernal pools.
Vernal pools, thank you. Struggling with my words tonight, it's been a long day. So that's all that I have. Final public comment.
Go ahead.
Case from Brian, 24 Hall Road. I just would like to applaud the highway department for the first big storm to start the year. I think everybody did a great job. Roads stayed safe, better than state roads once again. So people wandered onto the back roads more than they did the state roads, but I think they did a great job.
It was interesting, there were some comments made complaining about the roads, referring to 125 and Route 9, which I know people had to be reminded that those were state roads, not town roads.
Right, not taken care of by the town. Second thing was the library. I figured they would have learned by now with what the select board's gone through for the past 15 years of trying to get a new town hall and working with SMP. I think their best bet would be to do a design build. And I think the voters would probably go for it if you had a budget that you were looking at. I think that would be a great idea, and people would actually go for that, but $360 a square foot is, you don't even pay that in Rye, and that's absurd. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Select Person Hardicott. No, you can do it right from your.
Tracy Hardikoff, 48 Stone Farm Road. So, two things. I'd like to commend the highway department. They utilized their heated building for USDA distribution to a number of nonprofit organizations within the Seacoast community, and volunteers were pouring out, helping distribute food at a time where we're approaching a federal government change that will begin to severely limit the usage of supplemental nutritional assistance programs for those living at extremely low poverty levels. So hats off to the highway for making that available. And then in reference to the warrant article for the 200,000, I would like to see the select board consider, I don't care if it's a token 25,000, but putting something into the budget to show some type of support for the project, because I truly believe that it's up to our voters and always up to the residents of this town to make these major decisions. I think that, as a resident, when you put an article with something like the ability to change dollar amounts at deliberative session, you maybe open the town up to some serious changes, but I would like to see some type of support out there. And that's as a resident.
So, one thing that Connor pointed out is there is $8,000 for bond counsel in the town operating.
There
budget.
is, okay.
We have already,
And that's for what, bond counsel?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Done publicly speaking as a resident, thank you.
next
Oh, surprise.
3, just a reminder that there's the 3.
So I'm gonna speak to the issue of, using unexpended fund balance for funding warrant articles. I know there's an argument both ways and it works both ways. My personal opinion always is and always has been that you, if you have unexpended fund balance, you buy the taxes down, you go back to the voters and say, here's what we want to put money away for. While I appreciate the fact that for the most part, the voters and the board of selectmen have always supported the efforts of the fire and rescue department, I believe it's because we try to run a very frugal department and try to make sure that we're using our money wisely, and that's not a reflection on to say that anybody else is doing anything any different. But I wasn't happy last year when the board handpicked, well, the fire department probably gonna get what they want, so we'll go ahead and let that be a tax impact and we'll do all the other issues. And so I'm here to say that because the fire department does affect, warrant articles of the fire department affect the department that I'm responsible for running, I think that it's pretty simple. Either put the warrant, all the warrant articles that you want to put in unfunded, unanticipated fund balance, or none of them. And a perfect example is to, while I respect the fact that the library's coming forward and asking you to take $200,000 of fund balance, I don't think that's fair to say, let's do it for one department, but we'll let the fire department fight for what they want. So there again, there's an example of, much like Connor said, you're pitting one department against the other. So, if you folks are gonna do it, then do it for everybody. Thank you.
Any other public comments? All right, I'll close public comment. Do we have non-public? No need for a non-public, that's wonderful news. I also would like to say that at the last planning board meeting, I didn't mention this before, but it was wonderful to see Marcia in attendance.
That's fantastic, fantastic.
So welcome back to Marcia to be there with the rest of the board. All right, motion to adjourn.
Second.
There I.
There we are.
Hard cop five.
You all set one?
Thank you.
Sign some stuff.
All loose, under the table.